I have been on this bench long enough to know that money does not always enter a courtroom loudly. Sometimes it walks in wearing perfect manners and expensive fabric, carrying itself with the calm certainty of someone who has never once been told no in a way that mattered. That was what entered my courtroom the morning Piper Holston stood before me. She was 18 years old, young enough to still think consequences were negotiable, old enough to know exactly what cruelty sounded like when she used it. The courtroom was crowded before the hearing even began. Manhattan rain had left the floors damp with footprints, and the air smelled like wet coats and paper files. My bailiff, Officer Lennox Cole, stood beside the rail while the clerk shuffled documents into place. Then the case was called. Case 2026, TR 48117. Petition for reckless endangerment of a minor, property damage, and harassment. Maribel Sadto versus Piper Holston. I looked down at the defense table. Piper was already seated with one leg crossed over the other, staring at her phone. Cream-colored coat. White boots without a speck of dirt on them. Blonde hair tied back in a ribbon that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery bill. Her lawyer leaned toward her and whispered something. She barely listened. "Good morning, Miss Holston," I said. She glanced up slowly like I had interrupted her. "Morning. Not good morning. Just morning." With all the enthusiasm of someone answering a hotel receptionist. I looked at the petitioner instead. Maribel Sadto was 44 years old and looked tired in the honest way working people look tired. Navy coat. One loose button hanging by a thread. Rough hands folded tightly together. She worked mornings as a crossing guard and nights at a laundromat while raising her 10-year-old grandson, Louise. The boy sat beside her clutching a folder to his chest. Oversized sweater. Inhaler beside him on the table. The kind of careful silence children develop when life introduces them to hardship too early. I asked Maribel to explain why she was there. She took a breath. "It happened outside Hudson River Charter Prep," she said quietly. "Rainy morning. Kids were crossing. Louise was carrying his science project." She looked down at the boy for a second before continuing. "He worked 3 weeks on it." Then she described Piper's silver coupe flying through the school zone. Too fast. Phone in hand. Slush spraying across the crosswalk. The folding cart tipping over. Louise's project sliding into the gutter. The boy beginning to wheeze from panic and asthma at the same time. "And when I told her to stop," Maribel said, she laughed. I turned to Piper. "Is any part of that false?" Piper leaned back. "This is honestly so dramatic. I barely touched a cart. That was the first thing she got wrong. Not the speeding. Not the phone. The contempt." I kept my voice even. "You will answer the question asked, Miss Holston." A murmur moved through the courtroom. Maribel continued. "She got out of the car and looked at Louise's project in the street. I told her children had the right of way." Maribel's mouth tightened. "She said children in Manhattan should learn not to stand where expensive cars go." Louise lowered his eyes. Piper rolled hers. That was enough for me to open the evidence packet. The first image came from the school zone traffic camera. Timestamp. 7:43 a.m. Posted speed limit. 15 miles per hour. Piper Holston's vehicle, 32. The second image showed her halfway across the crosswalk line with a glowing phone in her right hand. I held the photo toward her. "That's your vehicle?" "Obviously." "And that is your phone in your hand?" She shrugged. "Looks worse frozen." "No," I said. "It looks exactly like distracted driving in a school zone." Her jaw tightened. "My dad's security drives faster than that. I am not interested in your father's security detail." The room went quieter after that. Then came the testimony that changed the feeling in the courtroom completely. Maribel explained that Louise had begun struggling to breathe after the incident. She asked Piper to call for help. Instead, Piper tossed 2 $100 bills into a puddle and said, "Use that for whatever poor people use." The gallery reacted immediately. One woman gasped out loud. Officer Cole shifted slightly near the rail. Piper's lawyer stood and tried to soften everything. "Young client. Emotional situation. Miscommunication. No physical contact with the child." The usual carefully wrapped excuses. I stopped him halfway through. "Sit down." I did not ask for a commercial. He sat. Then I opened the second evidence packet. Text messages retrieved under court order. I read the first one aloud. "Some crosswalk lady and her coupon kid are milking a splash like I ran them over." A low sound rolled through the courtroom. Not outrage yet. Disgust. Piper sat up straighter. "That text was private." "Not anymore." I read the next message. If this turns into a thing, Dad's office can bury it. Then I looked at the call log. 3 calls to her father's chief political aide before a single call to emergency services. You called your father's office before calling for help? Piper crossed her arms. I didn't know the kid needed help. He was having an asthma attack. I'm not a doctor. No, I said. You were just reckless. That was when her mask started slipping. You keep saying my father like it's a bad thing, she snapped. Do you even know how much he does for this city? I know this case is about what you did. My family funds schools. And yet you sped through one. That landed harder than she expected. For the first time, she looked annoyed instead of bored. Then came the bakery van footage. That video erased every remaining excuse. The courtroom watched Piper's coupe splash through the crosswalk. Watched Louise's project scatter into the street. Watched Maribel wave both arms. Then the audio came through. Oh my God, Piper's recorded voice said. It's paper and glue. Buy him a new one. Maribel asked her to stay. Piper tossed the money. Use that for whatever poor people use. Then came the line that changed the room. Try not to stand in front of things nicer than you. Silence hit like a dropped weight. I looked directly at Piper. Did you say those words? For 1 second, shame almost reached her. Then she made the worst decision of the morning. She looked across the courtroom at Maribel and Louise and said, if they didn't want to be talked to like that, maybe they shouldn't act like parking lot trash. The gallery erupted. Not screaming, but the sharp, stunned anger ordinary people make when they hear cruelty spoken without disguise. Officer Cole took 1 step closer. I leaned forward. One more outburst like that, and you will discover exactly how serious this court can become. Piper laughed. Actually laughed. Then I asked the question that mattered most. Why didn't you call for help when the child was wheezing? Her answer came instantly. Because this whole thing felt like a setup. People see a nice car and smell money. Maribel finally spoke with anger in her voice. We were trying to get him to school. Piper swung toward her. You were trying to cash in. Stop, I said sharply. She did not stop. This whole thing is a circus for poor people who think tears are a career. Louise flinched. That is what stayed with me most. Not the speeding. Not the insults. The flinch. Children remember humiliation differently than adults do. Adults recover. Children absorb. I ordered Piper to remain silent. Instead, she looked directly at me with that polished little smile and said the sentence that froze the courtroom. My father's vote matters more than your gavel ever will. The room went dead silent. Even the clerk stopped moving. I took off my glasses slowly and placed them on the bench. When I spoke again, my voice was calm. Miss Holston, look at me. She tried to hold eye contact. Tried and failed. This courtroom does not belong to your father. It does not belong to your last name, your money, your car, or your family's influence. It belongs to the law. Nobody moved. You drove 32 miles per hour through a 15-mile school zone while looking at your phone. You frightened a child. You destroyed weeks of work. You ignored a medical emergency. Then you mocked the people you harmed because you believed wealth made you untouchable. Her eyes filled. I was not interested in tears yet. You know what Maribel Saddo was doing that morning while you were speeding through that crosswalk? Working. Protecting children before most of this city had finished breakfast. She works 2 jobs and raises a child who depends on her. That is dignity. That is character. I pointed toward Louise. And that boy deserves safety from you. Piper stared at the table. I continued. Respect is not something poor people owe rich people. Respect is what every human being is due. Then I gave my ruling. Full restitution. $8,240 for medical treatment, counseling, replacement school materials, broken glasses, lost wages, and damaged crossing equipment. Paid by Piper personally. Not through a trust. Not through her father. Her. 14-month suspension of driving privileges effective immediately. No hardship exception. 160 hours of community service at the Manhattan Safe Steps Center assisting child pedestrian safety programs. Handwritten apology letters to both Maribel and Louise. No typed statements. No lawyer language. And 6 court-approved talks at Manhattan middle schools about reckless driving, entitlement, and accountability. Then I added the condition that mattered most to her. For the next 12 weeks, you will travel by subway or on foot. No chauffeur. No driver. No car service. Her face lost color. Then I addressed contempt. And because you openly challenged this court and the rule of law, I find you in direct contempt." Her lawyer stood immediately. "Your Honor," denied. I looked toward Officer Cole. "Take Miss Holston into custody." Piper stepped backward. "You can't be serious." "I have never been more serious." The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. That sound changed her face. Not anger anymore. Fear. Real fear. Consequences had finally entered the room. "Miss Holston will serve 48 hours in city custody," I said. Review hearing June 18th, court adjourned. 3 months later, Piper returned. No cream coat. No white boots. No polished little smile. Gray sweater. Flat shoes. Hair tied back plainly. Director Helen Park from the Safe Steps Center sent complete attendance records. No missed shifts. No excuses. No late arrivals. Piper had cleaned training mats, assembled child safety kits, handed crossing flags to parents in the rain, and completed every assignment given to her. She had sold designer bags to pay restitution herself. Then I read Louise's apology letter. "I looked at you and saw someone I thought I did not have to care about," she wrote. I was wrong. That sentence mattered, because it was finally honest. When I asked Maribel if she wished to speak, she stood quietly. "I still remember what she said," she admitted. But Louise wanted me to tell the court she looked at him when she apologized this time. Then she added softly, "That mattered." I looked at Piper. "Have you learned something?" "Yes, Your Honor. No attitude now. No performance. Just effort. And effort is the only apology I have ever respected." After the courtroom emptied, I sat alone for a moment thinking about the entire case. About Louise holding his ruined project. About Maribel standing in the cold protecting children. About Piper hearing handcuffs close around her wrists and finally understanding that influence is not immunity. Justice is not about humiliating the wealthy or glorifying the struggling. It is about drawing one clear line for everyone and saying, here is where dignity begins. Here is where excuses end. And here, no matter what your last name is, the rules still apply.